It is September 30th, 2025, and the Trump administration is now presenting some sort of a ceasefire plan for Gaza after Trump's fourth meeting with Netanyahu during his second term so far. Yet, when you look at this plan, when you look at all of the points involved, you are reminded that there is no peace here. There is no end to the genocide for the Palestinians. There certainly is no resolution and no consequences for Israel. But while Trump claims that he's all about peace, that he's solving all of these conflicts, he's also doing something very, very dangerous when it comes to U.S. relations with Russia, because we are just a few months away from the last remaining nuclear treaty between the two countries expiring. And while Russia has said that they will give the US another year, that they want to start talks, that they want a new form of a treaty, well, the US doesn't seem to be too interested. So what does that mean for where tensions stand and where could we be headed? Well, we got into all of the latest with a special guest earlier. So let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Scott Ritter, a former UN weapons inspector and US Marine Corps intelligence officer. Scott, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start off with the latest here as we have Netanyahu, who of course made his fourth visit to the White House in just 8 months on Monday. Now he and Trump are claiming they have yet another ceasefire plan, which would essentially leave Israel still in control of the Gaza Strip when it's all said and done. So how do you see the timing of Netanyahu's visit and the significance of the US and Israel coming back around and claiming that, oh no, they really want a ceasefire this time around?
I mean, it's just part of an ongoing con. Israel doesn't want peace. And this is the message that everybody needs to understand. Israel made it more clear than possible in the past few weeks. There are no red lines for Israel. I mean, yes, while Netanyahu sat next to Daddy made him call the Qatari government and apologize, but such an empty promise, an empty apology. It means nothing because Israel will do it again. They've said so. Netanyahu said so. If the Qatari government believes this apology, then they deserve everything that happens to them. And frankly speaking, the entire Middle East deserves everything that's going to happen to them if they believe that Israel wants peace. Israel doesn't want peace. Israel wants to dominate. They brag about it. This is greater Israel, baby. And there is no peace plan. It's simply a mechanism to solve the biggest political problem that Netanyahu faces, which is the hostages. Get the hostages home. And then what happens? Israel will kill everybody in Gaza because the war will start over. It's the impossible demands on Hamas. I mean, it's a killer, but the idea is to get the Arab world to put pressure on Hamas to agree to these terms. But once you strip away Hamas, I mean, why is Israel doing this? Because every day 1 or 2 tanks blows up and takes a crew with them in Gaza. Hamas ain't going away, and Israel can't beat Hamas, can't solve the Hamas problem. And the world is starting to call Israel out for the genocide. It's just too in your face. And so, Netanyahu is looking at a massively deteriorating situation. And at the end of the day, he'll have to kill every Palestinian in order to have peace in Gaza. And the world isn't going to tolerate that. And so he's going through, this is a big con. That's all this is. It's a 100% con game put on by one of the greatest con artists in the world, Donald Trump, and Benjamin Netanyahu. There's no peace plan here, literally nothing. And if anybody believes there will be a peace plan, I got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you. Pretty cool price.
Yeah, and I look at this and I go, even just with the 20 some points that they're laying out there saying, oh, we've got this all figured out, and I'm going, this doesn't solve anything, right? This does not lead to any kind of resolution. It certainly doesn't do anything long term for the Palestinian people. It doesn't officially end the genocide. And every time that Netanyahu and Trump get in a room together, I start to get a little bit concerned going, okay, what else are they cooking up here? I know that, we're in a position where the UN just invoked the snapback sanctions mechanism targeting Iran. And so looking at Iran, looking at the fact that it's been a few months since this 12-day war, what are your concerns about the current tensions in the Middle East and how the US and Israel could be cooking up some new plan, whatever that may look like?
Well, I mean, I'm sure Israel has contingencies for Iran if Iran were to do anything that represented a direct threat to Israel. But the nuclear program, that ship has sailed. Uh, you know, Israel already attacked. The United States joined in. Um, the International Atomic Energy Agency was complicit in this attack. The United States used the promise of diplomacy to set up the attack. Every trick that could be played against Iran was played, and Iran is not going to be played anymore. Um, Iran had an agreement with the IAEA to create the conditions for the limited return of the inspectors to Iran, but Iran's not going to turn around and having had IAEA inspectors come in and go, here's our scientists, here's our workshops, this is what we're doing, and the IAEA turns it back and gives those to the Israelis and the Americans to target while saying, oh, the Iranians are non-compliant, even though they knew the Iranians weren't in non-compliance, that the Iranians are fully compliant with their obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and because the JCPOA is a dysfunctional agreement, especially after the United States withdrew from it. And who is Israel to talk to anybody about nuclear programs when they have a undeclared nuclear weapons program? No, the fact of the matter is Israel and the United States had their shot. They dropped their bombs, and they're not going to get a second shot because the Iranians, let's remind everybody, it was Israel that picked up the phone to call the United States begging for a ceasefire. Why? Because their air defense shield didn't work. Iran was penetrating it. Iran hadn't begun to use the good weapons. Israel's defense shield hasn't gotten any better. Iranians' weapons have. And all the little tricks that Israel used to carry out the surprise attack, diplomacy, lulling them into a false sense of complacency, a 10-year program by the Mossad to build drone factories throughout, that's gone. And then getting Azerbaijan to open up their airspace so that Israel could come in through the Caspian Sea, Iran's unprotected rear, that's gone. Iran now has fighter jets, air defense systems. They know the tricks, and they have missiles. They've rebuilt their missile production facility. Israel knows this. So if Israel, wants to start another fight with Iran, they will pay an extraordinarily heavy price. Iran right now has the support of Russia and China, who recognize, that Israel has done bad things, and the United States has been complicit in these bad things, and that the concept of the purity of law when it comes to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty no longer applies because the United States and the Europeans and Israel can't be trusted. They haven't behaved properly. Neither has the International Atomic Energy Agency. So you're not going to get world unity in confronting Iran, as you did when the JCPOA was crafted by Barack Obama in 2015. And the Iranians are doing the right thing. They're saying, straight up, there's a lot of people have been speculating about, is Iran on the cusp of being a nuclear power? I've been guilty of this. Not guilty. I mean, it's logical analysis. You look at 60% enriched uranium, you go, why do you have it? What's the purpose of it? But the Iranians have answered that question. They have it because the United States and Israel attacked them. In order to get the world to the negotiating table, Iran has to do something. But which was 60% enriched uranium. But now the Iranians have made it clear they will dilute that down to nothing. And that can happen overnight. It's, so they will say, here it is, diluted, we've got nothing. But in exchange, you have to lift the sanctions, we have to get back to normalcy, and you have to let us enrich uranium. The Supreme Leader has said, there's not going to be nuclear weapons. The president of Iran has said, we don't want nuclear weapons. It's not as though he's sitting there going, well, if our Supreme Leader would give us the go-ahead, we would do it. He's saying, we don't want them. It doesn't matter what the Supreme Leader says about Islamic law. We don't want them because they are bad for us. And this is the reality. So there is no threat worthy of war. And if Israel did go to war, Israel would be hammered by Iran. And the United States isn't there to pull the chestnuts out of the fire anymore. The U.S. got away with a limited scope attack on Al Udeid Air Base. But if the United States wants to play silly games, then they'll win silly prizes. No silly prizes that come in the form of Iranian missiles that cannot be intercepted by U.S. missile defense.
Yeah, and I appreciate you laying it out like that because I'm looking at this and I'm going, you see all of the ways, and I know that, Israel wants war, but yet we saw it in just a 12-day span what Israel was actually prepared for and what the US was actually prepared for. And as I say all of that, I also want to get into the other side of things over here, as we're also keeping an eye on NATO and Russia and what the US is prepared for there. Because in recent weeks, you've had the alliance kicking up these allegations of Russian airspace violations right across a number of different members. You now have Keith Kellogg, Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, and Vice President J.D. Vance saying that Trump is considering bringing back long range strikes inside Russia. So, what do you make of the current tensions? Because it doesn't feel like the war in Ukraine is coming to an end quite like Trump promised, or that we're seeing peace anytime soon.
I mean, what we're seeing is, again, another form of the con, the great con. And I don't mean Khan. This isn't Star Trek and Return of Khan. This is the con, the con, the con game. The first con is the one being waged by Ukraine. With the British, this is a British plan, 100%. NATO and Europe has bought into it, but you're seeing a confluence of story threads coming together at the same time. One is that Ukraine can win on the battlefield. And so what you've seen is Ukraine has brought together its last, good offensive capability. They have surged drones in, and they've created a situational event north of Pokrovsk, where they've launched a counterattack. I just want to remind people, read your history before you open your mouths about counterattacks, please. The Nazis, up until the final days of the Battle of Berlin, were launching localized counterattacks. And they would push the Russians out of villages, and they would inflict casualties on the Russians, and then they lost the war. One of the biggest counterattacks in, modern history is the Battle of the Bulge. We swept the Germans out of France, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and, well, we're still in Netherlands. But next thing you know, they come pouncing through the Ardennes, catch us by surprise, and there's some bloody fighting, and then they lost the war. So here Ukraine has created a localized event, launched a counterattack. It's already over. The counterattack's over. You're not reading about it, but just take a look at the Russians. They've stabilized it. They've also turned the table on the drone thing. The Ukrainians swarmed in a whole bunch of drones, all their drone units, and they created what they call a drone wall, and it made life hell for the Russians. There's no doubt about it. If you were a Russian north of Pokrovsk, your life hasn't been good for the last couple of weeks. But what the Russians have done is brought in their drone capability. The thing about drone warfare is, you can get away with this, that, and the other thing, but then if you want to sustain it, you fall into literally what's known as a pattern of life. And your drone operators have to get up in the morning, launch their drones from a given location. And drone operators are humans. Once they have a location that works, they don't change that location. And then the Russians have their radars. They track all over things, and they reverse engineer the site, and they get the locations, and they bring in the assets, and they kill everybody. And right now, the most dangerous job in the world is a Ukrainian drone operator on the North Pokrovsk front, because you're dying on a daily basis. You're getting slaughtered, and the Russians are reasserting drone dominance over that battlefield, and they'll push the Ukrainians back and kill them all, as they did in Kursk and everywhere else. But that was known. What needed to happen is the Ukrainians need to sit down with Trump at the General Assembly. This was all timed, and say, we're winning. Look, we can win. We can do this. And Trump was supposed to go, oh, goody, we'll make sure you win by continuing to support you, and all this kind of stuff. At the same time, they create these fake drone attacks. Ukrainians repurposing, Russian decoy drones, sending them into Poland so the Poles can fire missiles against their own villages. And then this whole whatever the hell's going in Denmark with drones flying around. That's a Ukrainian ploy because you see what the Ukrainians are doing. They linked it to the shadow fleet. Russia's oil fleet, saying we got to shut it down because those shadow ships are going around Denmark launching drones. They're now drone motherships. We got to close everything down. And then they meet with Trump, and Trump is like, I mean, if what Zelensky says is true. I mean, this is crude. Because he's talking to Zelensky. Well, the Ruskies are going to do this. The Ruskies are going to do that. I mean, this is Zelensky saying what Trump is saying. Is that how Trump speaks about the Russians? I mean, it just shows a level of immaturity and a lack of seriousness, which is exactly what's happening. Because now he says in front of Zelensky, you all need to take back the 1991 borders. Go do it. You're winning on the battlefield. You guys are awesome, man. You showed me some pictures. Your tanks are, wow, you're really winning this war. And Keith Kellogg tells me you're doing so good. You gave him a medal. Thank you for that. And why not just go on to Moscow? Okay, you guys are so damn good. Good boy, Zelensky. Yeah, we're not giving you any weapons. We're going to sell NATO weapons. If they buy them, we're not giving them to them. And then NATO can decide to do with it as they want. Oh, by the way, God, the NATO weapons contracts are way down at the bottom because all our weapons have to come to us because we got China and things going on. So you may see weapons sometime in 2027, 2028, 2029. That's okay. Hey, Volodymyr, good job, pal. You guys are kicking ass. I love you. Go forth and conquer. What you want? You want tomahawks? You want to do that long range strike stuff? Yeah, I agree, man. You can't win a war unless you strike the Russians deep. And the British have been telling you that because you've been flying the British drones into Russia. I mean, good job. Yeah, we're going to consider that. Yeah, go away. Meanwhile, everybody is telling them, and Trump knows this. Remember, Donald Trump's the guy back in December of last year, knowing that U.S.-backed long-range strikes would precipitate a nuclear war with Russia, knowing that was the outcome, and having run on a platform and said, I don't want nuclear war with Russia, said, we won't authorize these. You can't use U.S. weapons in this way. And those were ATACMS missiles, can't use to the full range. The U.S. doesn't export the Tomahawk. I mean, we give them to our British allies, but it's not like we have Tomahawks for sale. Hey, anybody want an intermediate range nuclear capable missile that violates the missile technology control regime and would destabilize the entire world? Line on up. Oh, Ukraine, you want them to strike Moscow. You want to hit Moscow with those things. Why not? Because only the Americans can program the guidance system, which means that any target hit by a Ukrainian Tomahawk missile is actually hit by the United States. And the Russians know this, and therefore they will go to war against us because their nuclear doctrine says that whenever deep strikes take place, if they're conventional by a non-nuclear power, empowered by a nuclear power to do so, it will be treated as if the nuclear power is striking Russia. End of game. The Tomahawk will never be sold to Ukraine. Everybody take a deep breath. It isn't going to happen. Donald Trump didn't say it was going to happen. J.D. Vance didn't say it was going to happen. J.D. Vance said that the Ukrainians brought up many things they'd like to see happen, and the president is considering them. Keith Kellogg, because he's an idiot and he has the weight of the Ukrainian medal hanging around his neck, has said, oh, well, because the president's considering it, and J.D. Vance is also saying the president's considering it, therefore it's going to happen. It's not going to happen. Let me give you another weapon that's not going to happen. The Extended Range Attack Missile, ERAM. 3,200 of them are going to magically show up in Ukrainians' hands overnight so they can blow the hell out of those Ruskies. Except the contract for the ERAM, the only contract that's out there is a $34 million contract to produce a single prototype. When's that due? October. So next month, tomorrow, they'll have a single prototype. Now, from that, you guys do understand how defense contracting works, don't you? Nobody builds a factory without money, and nobody authorizes money unless the prototype passes muster. So the prototype will go through a review process. And then if it's agreed that this thing does everything it's supposed to do, then they will let a contract. They'll get money. But since America's not paying for it, the Europeans have to, produce about $875 million up front. Because no American company goes, we'll wait for you to pay us. They're going to build factories, hire people, get equipment. They're going to do that on spec, not on your life. And once the contract says, once they have it ready to go, the maximum production output is 1,000 ERAMs a year. 3,200 means 3.2 years. They don't even have the factories up yet. So, guys, there are no ERAMs going to Ukraine. Nothing. Ukraine gets nothing. And this is the reality. This is the con. For all the things that's going on right now, The United States has walked away from Ukraine, has washed its hands of Ukraine, and Europe is totally responsible for Ukraine. And as Ms. Kallas, the foreign policy person for Europe, has said, we can't do it. We don't have the money. We don't have the wherewithal. There's the con.
It really is a con. I think you summed it up perfectly because you see the ways in which, and even just with Trump's post, right, he's putting it out there as if, yeah, we're watching, you're doing it, you're making the progress, and it's like, okay. Now, the last thing I wanted to bring up while I have you here is, of course, the last remaining nuclear treaty between the US and Russia. It's set to expire in just a few months. You've got Russian President Putin saying, hey, we'll give you one more year. Let's continue talks. Look, we don't want the New START treaty to expire. The US doesn't seem concerned about it. It certainly seems like they should be. So, what are you looking at when it comes to that, and what should the public know about just how important this treaty is and how it needs to be renewed?
Well, let's put it this way. During the Cold War, each side, the Soviet Union and the United States, had around 30,000 strategic nuclear weapons. You need 400 to destroy the world. I just want people to understand that. 400. We had 30,000. Guys understand what that means. So fortunately, both the Russians and the United States recognized how dangerous this was. So we entered into arms control, arms reduction. And we brought down the numbers to 1,550. We can't go any lower than that until we deal with some fundamental issues like ballistic missile defense, et cetera. But 1,550 is better than 30,000. The problem is, once this treaty is done, the United States will overnight quadruple those warheads. We have the capability in place that's been planned for this. Congress wouldn't have ratified the New START treaty unless they had assurances the United States could immediately bounce back. And we will. We'll go to 6,000 to 8,000 nuclear warheads deployed within a matter of days, if not weeks, following the termination of this treaty, which is February 5th, 2026. This will lead the Russians to do the same. And next thing you know, we're back into an arms race at a time when there's a proxy war taking place in Ukraine that could easily spin out of control. What are the consequences of this? I would say that if we allow this new arms race to take place, we are looking at about a 100% chance of a thermonuclear war between the United States and Russia within a period of a year or so. That's how important this is. So for all the people out there saying, well, I didn't know about that. Yeah, you're going to die, literally going to die from a nuclear holocaust because the United States government is incapable of being serious for a moment. President Trump on July 25th said, this is the kind of treaty you don't want to expire. We need to make sure it doesn't. Well, it's too late, boss. You didn't do a damn thing. It's expired. Putin's giving you a 1-year extension on life to come up with a new treaty. But gosh, you let Marco Rubio on July 19th slash 1,300 jobs from the State Department, the majority of which came from the very departments that would be negotiating the damn treaty that you're letting expire. And you've consolidated positions, so it's not as though you have an arms control expert anymore. You've given them counter-narcotics and counterterrorism, two pressing events. So do you think they have the time now to focus on this treaty? I mean, and the guy who's supposed to be overseeing it, in addition to giving him additional jobs, hasn't even been ratified by the United States Senate yet. So you want to know why nobody's doing anything? Because there's nobody there to do anything. This president's on his own. He's being badly served by Marco Rubio. He's being badly served by everybody. He needs people to impress upon him the importance of taking advantage of what Vladimir Putin has offered here. He also needs to be reminded that the Russians just went through a major modernization program. All of their weapons work, and they're pretty damn good. Mr. President, we don't have any modern weapons. The B-21 bomber is too damn expensive. The Sentinel missile that was supposed to replace the Minuteman III, we can't do it. I told you that back in the day when they announced it. It would be $1 trillion boondoggle that would never work. And finally, Congress has agreed it's $1 trillion boondoggle that won't work. Now we have to extend the life of the Minuteman III until 2050. The missile was made in the 1970s. It's older than most dead people. So this is where we are. This is crazy. At a time when the Americans are worried about where their money goes, understand this. If we have an arms race, it will cost you about $4 trillion over the course of the next 10 years. $4 trillion we don't have, which means that we will panic. make bad decisions, and there'll be a nuclear war, and we'll all die. That's why extending this treaty is very, very important. It's literally a life and death issue.
Yeah, and the fact that the U.S. seems to be taking it so lightly is incredibly concerning all around. But I'm glad that you're raising awareness and doing what you can on your end to impress upon the public the importance of this for the people who just don't seem to understand that there is certainly a lot at stake here all around. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Scott Ritter, a former UN weapons inspector and U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer. You can find his work at scottritter.substack.com. Scott, thanks so much for your time and insight.
Thanks for having me.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also check out Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/RachelBlevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.